still remember the time when Superman soared through the sky of Metropolis, but his hands were waving around like he was swimming in midair, right? That is Superman. 1952, where the Man of Steel proudly took bullets straight into his chest, but then flinched to dodge an empty gun shell flying towards him. A survival reflex that is really hard to explain. Perhaps you will find it hard to believe, but that legendary hero once accidentally revealed sensitive details on screen, even having to use a woman's girdle to hide his bulging belly. And that seemingly self-flying cape was actually just the result of hand fanning right next to the lens from behind the scenes. Don't blink right after this are 20 moments that made millions of viewers hold their breath and press pause to check for themselves. 20. The legendary flying move turned into an unbearable swimming scene. You still remember the classic flying posture of Superman in the 1950s, right? Every time I rewatch the scene of the hero soaring through the sky of Metropolis, I can't help but burst out laughing. If in other movies the superhero flies with a majestic and overwhelming look, then here, everything is completely off orbit. Instead of stretching out in a powerful way, George Reeves continuously waved his arms and kicked his legs as if he was trying to survive in midair. Superman at this moment did not look like he was going to save the world, but looked like an athlete trying his best to swim freestyle to reach the finish line among the clouds. The truth behind it is even harder to believe. At that time, the directors had not even agreed on a flying posture. So the director asked the actor to fan his arms widely to create a sense of movement. To film this scene, Reeves had to lie pressed on a narrow wooden table, tense his whole body, and perform the swimming scene in front of the background screen behind him. The result was that instead of a divine symbol, the screen recorded the image of a lost whale struggling in the sky. 19. The moment Superman exposed his goods. You still remember that majestic scene, right, Superman? Proudly stood with hands on hips using his steel chest to face directly the black gun barrels. An immortal symbol of justice, a superhero who seemed to not know the concept of fear. I was extremely excited when watching this scene, always dreaming of one day putting on the majestic, tight suit, possessing a steel chest to stand up and protect justice. But the truth behind it shattered everything. The tight suit, made of super thin knitted silk fabric, completely betrayed its owner, plus there was no protective layer at all, making the sensitive area of the male actor clearly visible in front of the lens. In the direct frontal shots, this incident was so obvious that later TV stations had to cut and edit it drastically before daring to broadcast it again. And the stiff standing posture of Superman that you once thought was to withstand bullets, not at all. That was George Reeves, tensing his whole body absolutely to keep the suit from shifting further, trying to prevent worse exposed moments from appearing on national television 18. The Destroyer robot and the zipper that exposed everything, once promoted as a cutting-edge weapon, an atomic robot from the future with the power to wipe out all enemies but with just one pause. The entire Halo immediately vanished. That dangerous monster turned out to be operated by a technology that could not be more rudimentary. A long zipper line running along the back of the armor, clearly visible. That detail exposed the harsh truth. The scariest enemy of the Man of Steel was actually just a poor stunt actor locked inside a pile of scrap metal. Not stopping there because the armor was too tight, he also accidentally revealed his ordinary leather shoe heels under the robot's feet. And to complete the combat effect, the film crew had to stand behind the scenes, using hammers to knock on the metal sheets to create the sound of metal clashing, a method so manual it was hard to believe. A destroyer machine in the true sense. Powered by human strength and the zipper on the back. 17. Metropolis appearing as cardboard sheets. It is impossible not to mention the Superman scenes soaring over the sky of Metropolis City. I still remember screaming with excitement, passionately following every flight path of the Man of Steel, and always wishing to set foot in this bustling city where justice always reigns. Only that if you look closely at the streets beneath the Man of Steel's feet, this bustling city will be revealed as a primary school craft exercise. The entire setting is just cardboard sheets and 2D drawings placed behind the actor. When you pause, you will see flat buildings with no shadows, and even visible paper folds and peeling board edges at the corners of the screen. The film crew made full use of cheap matte painting techniques to deceive audiences in the era when televisions did not have high resolution. A crime city that only needs a strong gust of wind to blow through, and it can blow away even the city hall. 16. The most mindless bullet casing dodge in history. Besides the heroic scenes with nothing to criticize, Superman also has moments that made audiences like me laugh off our chairs. That is one of the most chaotic and hard to understand moments of the first season. In the episode Czar of the Underworld, Superman created a logic error that went underground. He casually stood still and took 6 bullets to the chest without any damage, as if enjoying a cool breeze. But the funny part is that right when the robber ran out of bullets and threw the empty gun casing toward him, Superman suddenly panicked and ducked his head as if afraid of getting hit on the head. Not afraid of real bullets, only afraid of plastic guns flying, this moment made the audience laugh off their seats because of the director's inconsistency. Adam West from Batman would probably also have to give up in the face of this sudden cowardice of the Man of Steel. Perhaps the Krypton brain calculated that bullets passed through, but guns would leave a bruise on the handsome face. 15. Superman breaks through a stone wall, but the wall is as soft as cardboard. Do you remember the scene where Superman punched through a stone wall as if it meant nothing? That moment in Adventures of Superman looked extremely satisfying, like a Man of Steel-style punch. Fast, clean, full of power. Cool, until you press pause. And then the so-called solid stone wall started to reveal its true form. It did not explode, did not crumble, did not feel heavy at all. Instead, the wall unfolded lightly, folding back obediently like a cardboard sheet that had just finished its acting role. Because what Superman had just punched through was not a real stone wall, but a breakaway wall, a prop made from thin plaster cardboard or lightweight material with pre-cut breakpoints. Just a light touch makes it fall apart according to the script, both safe for actors and creating a destruction effect on screen. 14. A hero with super hearing but still using a telephone. There is a very paradoxical thing in this film, which every time I think about it, I have to cover my mouth and laugh. Clearly, Superman is a superhero with the ability to hear sounds from thousands of miles away, but when he returns to being a normal person and works at the newsroom, he still has to use a telephone. More interestingly, sometimes George Reeves even acts surprised at the information he just heard, as if it were the first time he learned about it, despite the fact that in theory he could already hear everything before the call even began. To keep everything running in a proper procedure, the script forces Superman to act more like a switchboard operator than an all-powerful superhero. 13. The X-ray vision performance that exposed the thin fabric wall. I heard this secret from a friend of mine that if you pause at the moment Superman uses X-ray vision to see through a wall, you will see faint human silhouettes behind the wall. In reality, the film crew used an extremely homemade trick, replacing the real brick wall with a layer of thin gauze fabric, dyed in a similar color. When Superman activates his superpower, the crew only needs to turn on a high-powered light from behind the fabric to reveal the scene inside. The cut between the real wall frame and the fabric wall is so obvious that with just a single pause, the entire crude setup appears clearly like a shadow puppet performance in a kindergarten. 12. Superman bends a gun barrel metal turns into rubber, When watching the scene where Superman bends his opponent's gun as easily as eating a candy, how did you feel? As for me back then, I truly believed that hand carried divine power capable of crushing the hardest metal in the world. However, if you pause the film at the right moment, the truth of this super strength will make you laugh out loud. Instead of metal being sharply broken, the gun barrel bends and wrinkles exactly like cheap rubber. To save costs and ensure safety, the props team used soft lead guns painted to look like metal. Even funnier is the way George Reeves had to use all his strength veins bulging to bend a piece of soft rubber, truly unmatched acting intensity. 11. The secret of the superhero costume. If you are confident you are a hardcore fan of this film, have you ever heard this secret that the legendary blue-red hero actually wore a brown and dull gray suit for many years? The reason is that blue and red colors on black and white film would merge into a dark black mass, so filmmakers were forced to use brown to create the clearest brightness and sharpness for the S symbol. So when Clark Kent runs into the room in reality, Reeves is just changing from a suit into a rough brown costume that looks quite plain and unimpressive. The film crew had to carefully adjust lighting to ensure we were tricked spectacularly through the small screen. It turns out the greatest superhero in history began with a costume color. Chocolate brown 10. The superhero takes off, and the betraying springboard. Did you notice this at the exact moment Superman is about to leap off a rooftop? A strange object suddenly appears under George Reeves' feet. A small platform that looks just like exercise equipment. At normal speed, everything happens too fast to notice. But if you pause at the right moment, you will clearly see before taking off Superman actually stepped on a springboard to gain momentum into the air. The truth about flying ability is suddenly exposed without mercy. There is no supernatural launch at all, only a pre-planned jump with supporting props right under the frame. In the primitive effects conditions of the 1950s, making a human fly was extremely difficult, forcing the crew to use simple mechanical solutions like this. 9. The canyon flying scene at Cable nearly cost the actor his life. It is impossible not to mention the moment Superman flew majestically through a canyon in the episode The Evil 3. This superhero moment was so deeply etched in my mind that I even dreamed of flying when going to sleep. However, if you pause right when he flies into the cave, the dark secret of 1950s, Hollywood has revealed 2 thin steel cables flashing on George Reeves' back. In reality, this cable once snapped, causing Reeves to fall freely from a height of several meters and hit his face directly onto a hard concrete floor. That painful fall turned every later flying scene into a terrible psychological torture for the actor. To complete these suspended scenes, Reeves had to grit his teeth and endure the tightening of the cheap safety harness under the scorching heat of the studio. And in the end, even though every time leaving the ground meant facing death, Superman still had to smile confidently, a courage that even superpowers might not be able to match. 8. Clark Kent at the newsroom and the exposed Superman costume edges. This is also one of the scenes that made viewers like me press pause the most. It is when Clark Kent is in a heated argument with his boss at the Daily Planet newsroom, but all attention is focused on his collar. Just by looking closely under the thin white shirt, you can clearly see the legendary blue and red collar edges, revealing the secret of the clumsy reporter in broad daylight. It turns out that due to difficult costume changes, George Reeves often had to wear the Superman suit underneath his suit all day long. Under the harsh California sun, sweat poured out heavily, making the tight silk fabric stick even more and reveal betraying lines. 7. Superman flying and the marks of a women's corset. And in your eyes, is Superman always a symbol of unmatched strength with bulging muscles and an ideal body? George Reeves himself also made extreme efforts to maintain a bulky appearance until he began to gain weight uncontrollably. To save the image of the savior, the film crew had to use a very painful measure, forcing Reeves to wear a women's corset inside the tight suit to hide excess fat. Press pause at the scenes where Superman flies across the camera. You will see extremely unnatural marks and body folds appearing clearly. The corset was too tight, causing the fat to be compressed in an ironic way, exposing the hardship of the actor when having to force his body to maintain a fake, muscular image. Saving the world was already tiring, and still having to endure this kind of waist tightening is truly torture. 6. The poison drinking challenge and the real reaction to spoiled props. Do you remember the scene where Superman calmly drinks a bottle of extremely toxic chemical to challenge criminals? The moment he grimaces and strains to swallow that liquid made the audience believe that the Man of Steel was truly struggling with poison inside his body. At that time, I was also very scared. What if our superhero was poisoned and really died because Superman's face looked very bad? However, that painful expression was not acting at all, but the real physiological reaction of George Reeves when being actually poisoned. The prop that was supposed to be fruit juice had fermented and spoiled under the extreme heat of studio lights of thousands of degrees. Reeves had to drink that disgusting liquid to complete the scene without knowing he was drinking poison in the literal meaning. Look closely at Superman's eyes after finishing drinking. That is the effort to suppress the urge to vomit that was about to burst out so as not to vomit directly into the camera. 5. Superman blocking bullets and instinctive fear reaction. Let us recall the overwhelming displays of power. Instead of dodging, Superman always stands firm like a rock, letting bullets hit straight into his steel chest. But what was hidden behind that proud and unchanging appearance? A pause at the exact moment the bullets explode will reveal an ironic truth. The Man of Steel is actually slightly squinting and shivering out of fear. You know, at that time, there was no CG. So the crew attached real explosive charges directly onto Reeves' chest to create sparks. Those mini explosions right near the neck and face made the actor unable to suppress natural human reflexes. It turns out Superman's tense expression was not to intimidate enemies, but real fear when gunpowder exploded just a few millimeters from his chin. 4. Lois Lane in Season 2 and the dramatic replacement. The opening scene of Season 2 was truly a shock that made the audience pause to rub their eyes to check if they were watching the wrong film. I was the same because I, along with millions of other viewers, discovered something unbelievable. That Superman was still there, but the familiar Lois Lane suddenly disappeared without a word of farewell, replaced by a completely new face. This is the peak of dramatic character replacement behind the scenes. The reason was that Phyllis Coates decided to leave due to exploitative filming schedules and low salary. The crew, instead of explaining, chose a bold replacement, simply changing the actress without giving any reasonable explanation. This created a huge shock for loyal viewers, making them pause continuously to ask themselves, wait, where did the old Lois Lane go? 3. Superman rescues Lois Lane and the suggestive gaze. If there were an award for the most misplaced look in superhero history, this scene would certainly take first place. Superman has just rescued Lois Lane from a terrible plot, but instead of the gaze of a righteous savior, he gives his female colleague a very hard-to-handle look directed straight at her chest. When I was young, I did not notice this suggestive gaze of the superhero, but when I grew up, I found everything very funny. In reality, George Reeves was known for being romantic behind the camera, so this overly affectionate look made the audience question whether this was acting or the actor's real instinct emerging. Moreover, because they had to hang on wires for too long, both were probably tired. Combined with close physical contact, created an atmosphere hotter than the explosion behind. It is this not-so-innocent look that turned a heroic scene into the most paused moment of the series for people to examine carefully, too. The dive into the camera, the smile, and the haunting farewell. In the end, perhaps the most paused moment is the instant Superman dives straight toward the camera at the end of each episode. Amid heroic march music, the Man of Steel appears radiant with a confident smile like a promise of peace for the city of Metropolis. The audience does not pause to examine technical flaws, but to look closely at the face of the man who defined the concept of a superhero. For fans, it is not just the smile of a savior, but also a warm farewell from George Reeves. The man who devoted his entire career accepted all kinds of pain, from cables to corsets, to dedicate himself to this role. That radiant smile now feels like an emotional pause, reminding us of a legend who lived and passed away with the legendary S symbol on his chest. Goodbye, our Superman 1, the gloomy eyes of Clark Kent hiding a bad omen. Do you remember the final scenes of Season 6? When Clark Kent sits at the newsroom and boom, instead of the usual confident look, we see an extremely exhausted face with lifeless eyes and deep dark circles. I only naively thought that even a superhero could be tired and felt sympathy for him. But I did not know that everything was much deeper. More observant viewers often paused at these close-up scenes just to examine the changes on George Reeves' face. This gloomy atmosphere was actually evidence of severe depression when Reeves felt he was trapped in the cheap superhero costume for too long. The reality was that he was exhausted from a dense filming schedule and disappointment with a stagnant career. These scenes became more heartbreaking than ever because they were recorded only a few months before the mysterious gunshot that ended his life at the age of 45, like a sad omen, clearly shown on the face of the ill-fated superhero. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.